The Galactic King had made a grave miscalculation. He tried to assassinate a human envoy, unaware that she was no ordinary diplomat. She was Baba Yaga. Grand Admiral Kaz Thraxus stood tall at the observation deck of his colossal flagship, Eternal Dominion, his yellow eyes fixed on a speck approaching through the void. The approaching human vessel, pathetically small against the canvas of space, crept forward with what Kaz could only interpret as arrogance or ignorance. It was supposed to be an emissary of peace. To him, it was a joke. "So this is humanity's great ambassador?" he scoffed, nostrils flaring in 4 synchronized puffs. "A single ship? From a planet that only recently figured out how to cross a light year." Kaz's lip curled in disgust. The thought of hosting a human, especially a female envoy, made his scaly skin bristle. King Vexmal will be amused, briefly. Beside him, Commander Jeeve Lorax shifted uncomfortably in her ceremonial armor. "Admiral," she began cautiously, "our intelligence files suggest she's not as insignificant as she seems." Kaz glanced sideways. "Really? What could possibly be impressive about a lone Earthling?" "She's called Eleanor Petrov. She's successfully brokered peace treaties in 17 interstellar conflicts across 3 systems." 17. Kaz barked a laugh, revealing rows of predator-sharp teeth. "Adorable. We've subjugated 17 systems since last season." Jeeve hesitated, her secondary eyes flickering in uncertainty. "Still, there are rumors." "Rumors?" Kaz's voice rose with amusement. "I do enjoy a good ghost story, Commander. Do tell." "Some call her the Witch of the Stars," Jeeve murmured. "Others say she's never lost a negotiation. And those who've tried to deceive her rarely lived to repeat the mistake." Kaz bellowed in amusement, shaking the deck with his laughter. "Superstitious rot. You've spent too long on the human networks, Commander." "Yes, Admiral," Jeeve said, bowing her head. She dared not argue further. Just then, a soft chime signaled an incoming transmission. A moment later, the holographic display flared to life. Before them stood a poised, older human woman. Her silver-threaded black hair was pulled into a severe bun. Her cheekbones were sharp, her gaze piercing. Even through the translation filter, her voice carried a calm authority, and something else. A faint, unplaceable accent that resisted digital smoothing. "You must be Grand Admiral Kaz Thraxus," she said evenly. "I'm Eleanor Petrov, representative of the United Earth Federation. Thank you for agreeing to escort me to your king." Kaz Thraxus straightened his towering frame to its full height, over 3 meters of armored muscle. "Ambassador Petrov, your vessel is cleared to dock at Bay 12. Standard procedure requires that you undergo scanning, and your belongings will be inspected before you are brought before King Vexmal." Eleanor smiled politely, but her eyes never softened. "Naturally, Admiral. I'd expect nothing less. However, I should mention, some of my personal items are culturally unique. They may not scan as typical diplomatic cargo. Our security will determine what's suitable for your presence before royalty," Kaz said dismissively. "Prepare to board." The transmission ended. Kaz turned to Jeeve. "Inform security. She's docking shortly. And tell the king our guest has arrived." "Admiral, shall we honor the Alliance protocols? Earth is a recognized diplomatic state." Kaz gave a sharp wave. "Protocols are for species that earn respect. Earthlings bargained after we already took their frontier world. Vexmal has his own message to deliver, through her. But if we breach the Alliance Charter..." "The Charter means nothing once Earth systems belong to us," Kaz snapped. "Carry out your orders." Roughly an hour later, Eleanor stood calmly inside the Morgarian security chamber. She wore a simple gray suit with no insignias or embellishments, looking more like an accountant than a seasoned diplomat. The only item that stood out was a curious wooden pendant around her neck, primitive in appearance but clearly meaningful. "Remove all jewelry and place it in the tray," grunted the Morgarian chief of security, a brute of a creature with old scars twisting across his armored scales. Eleanor raised a brow. Her hand brushed the pendant. This is a heritage emblem from my homeworld. It holds diplomatic and cultural significance. I'd prefer to keep it on me. If you don't remove it, the security chief growled, we'll rip it off for you. Eleanor sighed quietly and unclasped it, laying it in the tray. Please handle it gently. It's very old. The Morgarian picked up the pendant between two claws and turned it over with clear disdain. This is it? A chunk of wood. It represents my office, Eleanor said evenly, and comes from the oldest traditions of my homeland. It looks like kindling, the guard said, tossing it into a containment bin. You'll get it back, if the king decides you're leaving alive. Eleanor's expression didn't change, but her eyes flashed, just for a moment, like lightning behind still clouds. Of course. Shall we continue? I wouldn't want to delay your king. She walked calmly as they led her through the massive corridors of the Eternal Dominion. Every turn, every doorway, every heavily armed checkpoint, she memorized them all. The Morgarians didn't hide their contempt. One guard even spat on the floor as she passed. Eleanor didn't flinch. She was used to being underestimated. She counted on it. First time aboard a Morgarian warship? Commander Jeeve Lorax asked as she joined the escort detail. It is, Eleanor replied, glancing around. Though I've studied Morgarian engineering extensively. This is a Dreadnought-class Hfy Sci-Fi model, correct? Upgraded propulsion from your campaign against the Taurians. Jeeve's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession. You're surprisingly well-versed, for a human. I consider knowledge a core component of my job, Commander, Eleanor said, flashing a calm, measured smile. And knowledge, as you may know, is its own kind of power. Jeeve's jaw tightened. The only power that matters is what you can wield on the battlefield. Is that the belief of your people? Or merely your king's? Eleanor asked, her tone even. King Vexmal is Morgaria, Jeeve replied rigidly. His command is law. Eleanor gave a small nod. Then I look forward to hearing his thoughts in person. The hallway ended in front of a set of towering doors, crafted from what looked disturbingly like fossilized bone. The surface was engraved with scenes of planetary conquest, legions marching, cities burning, aliens kneeling. A grim celebration of the Morgarian Empire's legacy. The king will receive you now, a herald intoned from beside the entrance. Bow before entering. Speak only when addressed. Eleanor's posture stiffened. I'm afraid I must decline. The herald blinked, stunned. Excuse me. Earth's ambassadors don't bow to foreign rulers, Eleanor said simply. We engage as equals, or not at all. The herald's expression twisted in shock. You'll be executed for such insolence. Then negotiations will cease before they begin, she said without blinking. And your consequences will be substantial. Before the herald could answer, the massive doors rumbled open. Inside, the throne chamber stretched wide and high, grandiose and ominous. The walls were decorated with relics from countless conquests, frozen weapons, alien bones, shattered flags. And at the center, sitting upon a grotesque throne made of molten metal and organic remains, was King Vexmal of Morgaria. Unaware he had already sentenced her to die, he watched Eleanor enter, believing this encounter would be brief and bloody. He would soon regret that assumption more than any decision in his centuries-long reign. Vexmal was enormous, even by Morgarian standards. Rising nearly 4 meters when upright, his exoskeleton was covered in scars, a map of 1,000 battles. 4 of his 6 arms were cybernetic, glinting under the throne room's cruel light. The crown he wore wasn't for ceremony. It was a neural command link tied directly into every weapon aboard the Eternal Dominion. So Earth sends an aging female to grovel before her execution, he sneered. His voice echoed like a seismic tremor, made understandable only through the translation field, though no filter could soften the venom in his tone. How utterly predictable. Eleanor advanced with deliberate steps, stopping at the exact distance required by galactic diplomatic custom, near enough to show respect, yet far enough to assert parity. King Vexmal, she began calmly, I bring you greetings from the United Federation of Earth. I am not here to beg. I'm here to establish terms that benefit both our civilizations. The king laughed, a thunderous, mocking sound that reverberated through the chamber. His attendants followed suit with sycophantic chuckles. Terms! Vexmal roared. You think you have terms? We've already seized your colonies. Your defenses are primitive. Your force is laughable. We do not barter with prey. Eleanor's face remained placid, unreadable. And yet, here I am, standing before your throne. Curious that such an almighty king would personally meet with a creature so beneath him. The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Vexmal leaned forward slightly, his core eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. You have bravery, I'll grant you that. Or maybe just a fool's ignorance. Neither, Eleanor replied, hands calmly folded behind her back. Just experience. She took a measured breath. Your empire has dominated many worlds, yes, but you've never faced humanity in full. The king let out a dismissive grunt. Humans are weak, emotionally fractured. They squabble among themselves. The only thing you excel at is multiplying like vermin. Then why waste your military strength? Eleanor asked, raising an eyebrow. Surely there are better uses for Morgarian fleets than exterminating parasites? Vexmal's mandibles clicked, a clear sign of irritation. Your world holds resources we require. Its location is strategically critical. And more importantly, your destruction will serve as a warning. A message to any other civilization tempted to defy us. I understand, Eleanor said. She gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Before we proceed, I'd like to request the return of a specific item. My diplomatic pendant. It was taken during intake. According to the traditions of my homeland, it must be worn for formal negotiation. The king raised one clawed hand. Between two fingers, he held the wooden pendant. This, he said mockingly. A twig you wore around your neck? Your guards inspected it thoroughly. Nothing but ancient plant matter. Sentimental rubbish. It's more than that, Eleanor said. It's a symbol. From one of our oldest myths. Vexmal turned the pendant over in his claws, bemused. What myth? The legend of Baba Yaga, she answered quietly. A witch who dwelled in a house with legs like a beast. No one who sought to harm her ever lived to tell the tale. There was a flicker of movement in the shadows behind her. And though Vexmal didn't realize it yet, the witch had come to his doorstep. And she did not come alone. Eleanor's voice shifted, less formal now, more like a storyteller spinning a tale before a fire. There was no anger, no pleading, just an eerie calm. She was neither saint nor monster, she said softly. But she was never one to be provoked. Charming, Vexmal sneered, the sarcasm thick in his voice. Your species still clings to fairy tales. Witches? In space? There is no magic among the stars, only dominance. And those too weak to claim it. Perhaps, Eleanor said, giving a ghost of a smile. But sometimes the truth hides behind familiar masks. With a grunt, Vexmal crushed the pendant in his fist. The splintered remains of wood rained to the ground at his feet. Just like this sham of a negotiation, he spat. I allowed this charade for one reason alone, to look you in the eyes before I erase your planet from existence. A murmur rippled through the crowd of nobles and officers. Commander Jeev Lorax stepped forward, visibly uneasy. Your Majesty, she said quickly, this human is here under galactic protection accords. Harming her would violate interstellar law. Silence. Vexmal's voice thundered. The accords are meaningless. They apply to civilizations, not to insects. Eleanor looked down at the shattered remnants of the pendant, then slowly lifted her gaze to meet the king's. Something in her expression changed. Subtle. Quiet. But it chilled the air around her. King Vexmal, she said, voice steady and hollow as the void, I advise you, for the last time, to reconsider your path. I came offering generous terms, access to resources, technology, diplomacy. We'll pick through your ruins and take what we want, Vexmal snapped. With a simple gesture, 4 royal guards advanced, weapons drawn. This is your final warning, Eleanor said quietly. She didn't even glance at the soldiers approaching. Hurt me, and you'll trigger consequences your mind is too small to grasp. Vexmal let out a bark of laughter. Consequences? Your fleets are scattered. Your tech is inferior. Your allies tremble at our name. You have nothing. Eleanor sighed, not with fear, but with disappointment. Not them, she murmured. Me. Enough games. Guards! Vexmal shouted. Take her to the detention decks. Prepare the broadcast. I want her execution transmitted to Earth before the first strike lands. The guards closed in. One reached out and seized Eleanor's arm. Then the world shifted. What happened next would later baffle Morgarian analysts. They would comb over surveillance footage frame by frame, trying to understand how it had happened, how one human woman did what no army ever had. Because Eleanor moved. Not like the slow, clumsy humans they knew. No hesitation. No warning. One instant she was standing calmly. The next, a guard lay crumpled on the floor, his neck bent at an unnatural angle. Another screamed, clutching a shattered arm. Stop her! Vexmal bellowed, surging from his throne. More guards rushed in. Eleanor's hand disappeared into her gray jacket, and re-emerged seemingly empty. But then, 3 more guards dropped. Their bodies bore wounds that hadn't existed a second before. Deep gashes that seemed to appear from nowhere. I warned you, Eleanor said. Her voice had changed. Gone was the smooth, professional diplomat. What came from her throat now was rasping, ancient, so primal that the translators didn't quite catch it. It vibrated in bone and blood. It reached past language and logic and spoke to fear. I am not just a diplomat. For the first time in his reign of terror, King Vexmal felt something alien crawl down his spine. Dread. True, cold dread. She was human, but not. Her movements were too precise, too swift. Her strikes, lethal and invisible. And her eyes, they now shimmered with something unnatural. A glow. Faint but undeniable. Not light, exactly. Not energy. But presence. What are you? He demanded. Eleanor turned her gaze to him and smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was a smile ancient stories were built upon. The kind of smile that lingered in the dark long after the fire died out. I told you, she whispered. Baba Yaga. A tale from the old country. A witch who lived in a house that walked, and feasted on those foolish enough to cross her. Alarms blared suddenly. Sirens shrieked through the ship's corridors. The throne room's reinforced doors slammed open, and reinforcements poured in, dozens, then hundreds, of elite Morgarian soldiers. Vexmal activated his personal shield generator. A translucent dome of crackling light formed around him, a field strong enough to deflect antimatter rounds. Eleanor didn't stop. She walked forward, straight through it. The shield rippled, flickered, and collapsed. Guards froze mid-step. Vexmal's voice caught in his throat. Hundreds of weapons pointed at her now. Cannons, blasters, plasma rifles. Eleanor looked around with quiet amusement. Well, she said. You actually look afraid. Her gaze returned to the king. I was told Morgarians never showed fear. Whatever illusion you're using, Vexmal snapped, backing away, it won't save you. His cybernetic arms transformed, shifting and locking into twin plasma cannons. This ship holds 10,000 of my best warriors. You are one woman. Correction, Eleanor said, her voice suddenly sharper, colder. She tilted her head and rolled her neck until a series of unnatural, echoing cracks rang through the throne chamber. I only look human. Only seem like a woman. But, as I mentioned earlier, appearances lie. She raised her hand. The broken pieces of her wooden pendant, scattered across the floor, began to tremble. Gasps erupted from the watching crowd as the fragments lifted, slowly spinning in the air. Faster and faster they turned, forming a miniature vortex of splinters and splinters, orbiting her like a halo of whirling knives. "Open fire!" Vexmal bellowed. A deafening chorus of weapons discharged. Plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, and beams of pure energy lit up the chamber in a cascade of destruction. The blast zone was consumed in blinding brilliance and raw sound. But when the light faded, Eleanor remained, untouched, unburned, unmoved. She stood at the heart of the devastation, perfectly centered in a ring of melted flooring. Not a single scorch mark touched her body. The wooden fragments still spun gently around her head like orbiting moons. "Majesty," Commander Lorax called out, panic rising in her voice. "We have to evacuate you now." "No!" Vexmal roared. "I will not retreat from a single intruder. Deploy the royal battle armor." Behind the throne, a hidden panel hissed open. From it, a colossal exosuit emerged, built specifically for the Morgarian king's hulking frame. Armor plating thicker than starship hulls. Weapon pods gleaming with antimatter disruptors. It was a weapon of war in the shape of a god. Vexmal stepped into the harness, and mechanical limbs wrapped around him with precision. Plates locked. Servos spun. The suit powered up with a scream of rising energy. 10 meters tall and armed to the teeth, the king took flight, hovering above the floor. "Let's see how your tricks fare against Morgaria's might," he boomed, his voice now amplified by the suit's external speakers. Eleanor exhaled slowly, almost sadly. "You could have just handed me back my pendant and talked like a reasonable ruler," she murmured. With a flick of her fingers, the orbiting wood shards shot outward like darts. Each one struck a joint, a control node, or a neural interface port. And with each strike, sparks burst from the armor. Systems shorted. Limbs spasmed. One massive mechanical arm went limp. Then another. Targeting lasers flickered and died. Vexmal staggered. "What is this? What kind of weapon is that?" he cried out, fighting to remain airborne. "It's not a weapon," Eleanor replied, approaching with unhurried steps. "It's something older. Something forgotten. Or maybe something your kind never understood." The ring of guards formed a shield around their king, but none of them looked eager to engage. Fear had replaced their arrogance. "Your Majesty," Lorax shouted again, "we must fall back. This entity is beyond our comprehension. There will be no retreat." Vexmal howled. "No surrender. I am Vexmal, conqueror of 1,000 stars." "And I," Eleanor said as she came within reach of the failing machine, "am older than your stars. I've seen galaxies collapse, watched species bloom and wither into nothing, and I have very little patience left for tyrants." She touched the leg of the king's battle armor. A sound like metal screaming filled the chamber. The armor folded in on itself, crushed as though gripped by an unseen hand. It buckled, cracked, and dropped like a dying beast. The whole throne room shook as the exosuit crashed to the floor. The guards scattered. Eleanor walked calmly to the fallen titan, knelt beside it, and tapped the armored helmet with her finger. It shattered like glass. King Vexmal lay inside, his face bloodied and wide-eyed with terror. "Now that I have your full attention," she said, her tone bright and diplomatic again, "shall we begin peace negotiations?" The king's voice was a whisper now. What are you?" "I told you," she replied, standing and brushing non-existent dust from her jacket. "I'm a diplomat." Then she paused and added, "But before that, long before, I was something else entirely. On Earth, they've called me many things. Baba Yaga was one of the nicer ones." She looked around the stunned court and then back at Vexmal. "Here's what happens next. You will withdraw from every human colony you've invaded. You will sign a treaty ensuring peace with Earth and its allies. And you will pay restitution for the destruction your empire has caused." And if I refuse? Vexmal choked, though he no longer had the voice of a king, only the breath of a man who had looked into the abyss and found it staring back. Eleanor's expression darkened, and with it, the light in the chamber seemed to dim. Then I'll remind you, she said softly, and everyone who watches this transmission, why mothers once warned their children never to speak my name aloud. Across the floor, Commander Jeeve Lorax stepped forward, slowly lowering her weapon. Your Majesty, she said, I believe we should give the ambassador's terms serious consideration. You traitor! Vexmal hissed. No, Your Majesty, Jeeve replied. I serve the Morgarian people, and I will not see us become yet another entry in the long list of civilizations that thought humans were easy prey. She turned to Eleanor. If I may ask, are there others like you on Earth? Eleanor's gaze softened. Humanity holds many secrets, Commander, she said. Some, like me, are rare. Others have talents of a different sort. But let me say this clearly. She looked directly at the entire court. It would be unwise to test what Earth is truly capable of when it feels threatened. From beneath the twisted wreckage of his battle armor, King Vexmal glared with venomous fury at his second-in-command. You would surrender, because of the threats of a single being? He rasped. Where is your warrior pride, Commander? With respect, Your Majesty, Jeeve Lorax replied evenly, pride is of little comfort to the dead. She turned slowly to face the assembled nobility. I have witnessed enough to recognize that we face a force beyond our comprehension. Raising her voice, she proclaimed, as second commander of the Imperial fleet, I formally request an emergency session of the War Council to consider the terms offered by Earth's representative. A murmur swept through the court. No one looked at Vexmal. Not a single official met his eyes. Excellent, Eleanor said, clasping her hands. While you deliberate, I'll require access to long-range communications to report progress to my government. I'll also need personal quarters. Nothing extravagant, but privacy is essential. You shall be accommodated, Jeeve said quickly, recovering her formality. Guards, escort Diplomat Petrov to the diplomatic wing. Ensure her comfort and security. As Eleanor turned to go, the battered king spat out a final threat. This isn't over, he snarled. No human challenges Morgarian might and walks away alive. Eleanor paused. Slowly, she looked back over her shoulder. You still don't understand, she said. I never said I was only human. That was your mistake. Then she continued walking, flanked by guards who now treated her with quiet reverence rather than suspicion. Behind her, the splinters of her shattered pendant rose from where they'd fallen, dancing through the air. As she walked, the pieces reassembled themselves, fitting back together with uncanny precision. By the time she reached the corridor, the pendant floated whole once more, gently spinning behind her like a loyal companion. Across the eternal dominion, whispers spread like wildfire. Beware the human diplomat, they said in hushed voices. She is not what she appears to be. 3 days later, Eleanor Petrov stood in the observation deck of the Morgarian flagship, her gaze fixed on the distant starlines. One by one, Morgarian warships were breaking formation and pulling away from human colony space. Behind her, Commander Jeeve Lorax entered the room, datapad in hand. The final withdrawal orders have been transmitted, she said, voice clipped and neutral. All Morgarian vessels will be beyond human territory within 48 hours. Good, Eleanor replied, still watching the retreat. And the non-aggression agreement? Ratified by the War Council and transmitted to our homeworld, Jeeve confirmed. King Vexmal attempted to veto the decision, but the council overruled him. At that, Eleanor turned, one eyebrow arching. A monarch overruled by his own council? Unprecedented. Jeeve's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a Morgarian sign of unease. These are unusual times. Your display in the throne room has forced many of our military leaders to re-evaluate our strategic doctrine. How intriguing, Eleanor said, leaning casually against the viewport. And what, exactly, has your analysis concluded? That we underestimated your species, Jeeve replied. Or perhaps you intentionally allowed us to do so. She hesitated, then added quietly, there are some who now believe your people have deliberately concealed your true capabilities, that you've allowed the galaxy to see only weakness. Eleanor gave an unreadable smile. An interesting hypothesis. Or maybe, she said, you simply never bothered to look beneath the surface. Perhaps, Jeeve conceded. She placed the datapad on a nearby table, then looked Eleanor directly in the eye. May I speak freely, Diplomat Petrov? Of course. What you did, none of it aligns with our understanding of physical laws. You walked through a barrier designed to repel antimatter. You moved objects with a gesture. You disabled battle-grade armor with fragments of organic debris. Her voice lowered. Nothing in our science explains this. How did you do it? Eleanor lightly touched the wooden pendant now resting against her chest. Commander, tell me, have you ever wondered why, in a galaxy bursting with intelligent life, so few species ever leave their planets? Our analysts assume most destroy themselves before developing interstellar travel. A tidy theory, Eleanor said, and a comforting one. But what if there's another answer? She stepped away from the glass, circling the room slowly. What if there are forces, ancient, hidden forces, that govern more than your technology can detect? Forces that Earth's oldest myths speak of. Powers your instruments cannot measure and your weapons cannot reach. Jeeve's scales rippled down her arms, a Morgarian shiver. You're speaking of superstition. Of magic. I'm speaking of truths your civilization forgot how to perceive, Eleanor replied. Humans haven't mastered space. Not yet. But some of us still remember the old path. Some of us have bonds with deeper aspects of reality. With things your science doesn't have names for. Jeeve turned to her. Is that why you were sent? To demonstrate those powers? Eleanor laughed, not with mockery but with something older, wiser. No, Commander. I was sent because I am a good negotiator. A very good one. My credentials are real. My successes documented. I prefer peace. I prefer treaties. I'd rather spend a week in talks than a moment in battle. Then why reveal yourself? Why break the illusion? Because your king left me no choice, Eleanor said. He didn't just threaten me. He threatened Earth. All of it. Her voice darkened. And I don't take kindly to threats. There are lines, Eleanor said, her voice suddenly cold and clear, that one does not cross with beings like me. Her eyes hardened briefly, glowing not with light, but with something deeper, older. Consider what happened here a courtesy, Commander. A warning. There are forces in the universe that your instruments can't track. Realities your science doesn't even recognize. And humanity. She paused. Humanity has always walked between those realities. Commander Jeeve Lorax gave a tense, uneasy laugh. You make your species sound like the villain in a ghost story. Most humans are exactly what you see, Eleanor admitted. Clever. Resilient. But biologically ordinary. Then she added with a small, knowing smile, but scattered among us are others. People who remember the ancient ways. People who never fully severed their ties to things your kind would call impossible. Jeeve nodded slowly. I see now why it's sometimes advantageous to be underestimated. Before Eleanor could respond, the commander's comlink chimed. She checked it and stiffened. Your shuttle is ready, Diplomat Petrov. The transport captain is standing by to return you to Earth. Excellent, Eleanor said. Although, I have one final stop to make first. Stop. Jeeve tilted her head. The detention level, Eleanor answered. I believe you're holding some human prisoners from the colony sieges. They'll be returning home with me. Jeeve Lorax hesitated, only for a breath, then nodded. I'll make the arrangements immediately. An hour later, Eleanor stood in the shuttle bay. Around her were 23 human colonists, newly freed and visibly dazed, Rescue had seemed impossible just hours ago. The Morgarian guards stationed nearby stood stiff and respectful, their eyes avoiding hers entirely. Even King Vexmal had reappeared, pride bruised but survival instinct finally overriding his fury. He approached with a formal delegation in tow, his towering frame still a formidable presence, though this time unarmored and, somehow, less certain. "Diplomat Petrov," he said carefully, "the Morgarian Empire acknowledges the terms of peace. Our forces are withdrawing from all occupied human territories." He paused, then added, "But make no mistake, we will be watching. We will learn. And we will not be caught unprepared again." Eleanor offered him a polite nod. "As you wish, Your Majesty. Though I hope, in time, you'll find something more valuable than preparation. Perhaps even cooperation." Vexmal's mandibles clicked in disapproval. "That's a philosophy for the weak." "No," Eleanor replied gently, "that's a philosophy for the wise." She reached up, removed the wooden pendant from her neck, and extended it toward him. "A gift," she said. "A reminder of what happened here." Vexmal instinctively recoiled. "You want me to accept that? That cursed thing?" "It's just wood now," Eleanor said softly. "The power was never in the object, but in what it represented." She placed it on a nearby console. "Keep it, burn it, forget it, or remember. That choice is yours." Then, without another glance at the king, she turned and began leading the rescued colonists toward the waiting shuttle. Jeev Lorax stepped forward one last time. "Before you leave, Diplomat Petrov," her voice lowered, uncertain. "The tales you told Baba Yaga, were they true?" Eleanor paused at the hatch. "All stories," she said, "contain a little truth. The question is whether your people are wise enough to find it." "And if we cross paths with Earth again?" Jeev asked quietly. "Will we meet more like you?" Eleanor's smile was serene, yet something ancient shimmered behind it. "Pray," she said softly, "that you never have to." The shuttle detached with a quiet hum, drifting away from the enormous Morgarian warship. Eleanor sat among the stunned, grateful colonists, gazing out at the shrinking silhouette of the Eternal Dominion. A young woman leaned forward, hesitant. "Ms. Petrov, is it true what they're saying? That you faced the king and his entire court, alone?" "Diplomatic meetings often get dramatic," Eleanor said with a casual wave of her hand. "What matters is that we achieved peace." "But the Morgarians never sign treaties," the woman insisted. "How did you convince them? Why did they let us go?" Eleanor smiled, her eyes twinkling with a glint not entirely earthborn. "Let's just say," she murmured, "I offered them a brief reminder." "A reminder of what?" "Of why humans, despite everything, survive." She turned her face back to the stars. The black between the constellations, the infinite silence beyond the colonies. Humanity's journey was only beginning. But hers. Her journey had begun in a darker place. A place older than empires, older than ships, in misty forests, in shadowed legends, in the whispered warnings told by candlelight. The universe was full of wonders. But it also held dangers far older than any race dared admit. And sometimes those dangers didn't come with claws or armies. Sometimes they wore the face of an aging diplomat, carried a wooden pendant, spoke gently, smiled rarely. The legend of Baba Yaga had crossed the stars, and the Morgarian Empire would never forget it.